person in the relationship turns out to be the most incredible healing companion that we could possibly have. But if we misinterpret those signals as something that I'm feeling has to do with what she's doing, and she's misinterpreting the way she's feeling has something to do with what I'm doing, totally lost. Doesn't have a chance. Doesn't have a chance to work. Well, we're at a time right now where it'd be a good idea to take maybe a 10-minute break, and then when we come back, what I'd like to do is a couple of role plays, which I think will illustrate what we're talking about a little bit more. What we're going to do is, before we get into the illustrations, we're going to do a role play illustrating some of the concepts that we just talked about. What's your first name? Susan. Susan. I'm Bill. One aspect of this role play is we have to get friendly right at first, and I have to I have to put my arm around you if that's okay. That's okay? All right, here we go.
Okay,
what has happened? Yeah, feel free to put your arm around me.
I'm already distancing.
Okay, whatever. What we're doing is Susan and I are in that process of falling in love, okay? And we just met, and everything's fine, and when I said literally joined at the hip, here we are. And this is a time, you know that Sugar Crisp bear with a Bing Crosby voice that says, can't get enough of that Sugar Crisp? Well, in this particular experience, I can't spend enough time with Susan. It's whenever she's out of my sight, it's almost painful. It's like a withdrawal experience because although morphine is coursing through my veins, when we're together, there's kind of a mutuality impact to where we bounce off each other in terms of the energy. And so it's just really high being around each other. And so it's just great to be together. Whenever she has to go to work, I feel like I'm kind of getting robbed of a life experience that's important. On weekends, forget trying to get a hold of us. You won't find us. It's in that stage, okay? Now what happens, as it did in the Tarzan illustration, after a while I'm going to get a little nervous about this because I'm going to take the responsibility of having that being in love, infatuation level of excitement start to subside in me before it does in Susan. And so what happens is, just out of the blue, without understanding why, without really being in touch with what's going on, one day I'll go, whoa, I got to escape. And what I will do is I'll try to do it nonchalantly, exactly, and that's good, you're doing good. And she still has a hold of my shoulder, so I'll have to shake that hand off a little bit, and as I start to move away, yeah, you're doing great, and then she's here, and I'm going to have to go a little bit quicker. And so there's probably going to be a time that I realize that she's not going to let up. And this is where I'm going to have to say some things that hurt her feelings. So, clackety clack, I'm saying things to hurt your feelings, okay? And that really dulls her out. And look what happens. I escape for a while. She gets mad. She finally listens. She finally listens to 2 or 3 of her best friends who tell her, listen to what they tell her. They tell her, you know, we never wanted to tell you this, but we always thought he was a creep from word go. We just didn't want to spoil things. You know, those best friends don't tell you that until this happens. And then they all flock around. They say, we think he's a jerk. He's a dirtbag. You never should have gotten together with him. And she'll agree until she starts to turn. And as soon as she starts to turn, my guts start feeling like they're being pulled out. And I'm no longer comfortable. I've got to go over here, and I will tell Susan anything she needs to hear. And it may take some work. But finally, she'll come around. And this is the real embarrassing time for best friends. You know?
I'm not going to listen to you.
Right. When they've agreed 24 hours before this experience that I'm just this uncaring jerk that she ought to get rid of. And that kind of puts some distance between friends. So it is an interesting issue whether or not you ought to tell your best friend that you're ready to marry a monster or not. But that's for you each to figure out on your own on how do you want to deal with that. And so we'll be together again. and everything will be well in terms of I won't be freaking out, she won't be freaking out until it's time to get away again. Now, what happens in a lot of relationships that stay together, this happens, stay where you are. Okay, we need a wide angle here, and we'll just get out to about here. Now, weave with me like we're kind of doing a dance, yeah. Yeah, you're doing, that's it, you're doing great. Now, you've heard in that story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, the porridge, you know, not too hot, not too cold, just right. Come on, have you heard of that story? Thank you very much. All right. I was going to say, you mean I'm the only one that heard of Goldilocks? That's wild. Anyway, what happens is, even in relationships that stay together, oftentimes there isn't a lot of intimacy that's going on in those relationships, because what happens is the people will develop this unconscious distance where it's not too hot, not too intimate, not too cold, not too distant, but just right. What's happening here? Huh?
We're doing opposites.
Yeah, we're doing opposites, but what's going on? I don't feel engulfed. Why? She's far enough away. Reach your hand out. I don't feel engulfed because she's far enough away, but I don't feel abandoned. Did I get that right, or is it opposite? I don't feel engulfed because she's not too close. And I don't feel abandoned because she's not too far away. But guess what happens in this scenario? Either some guy will come into her experience, or some lady will come into my experience, that the heartthrob kicks in again. You know, we fall in the morphine cycle. And then I will either pursue the new female or she will pursue the new male. And then, if she does it, I'll pursue her and get hurt as the one who's dumped and abandoned, or vice versa. Because this, although it's safe and doesn't hurt in terms of fear, there's nothing going on. Ain't nothing happening. You know? And there are an incredible amount of relationships that are doing this. There's no heat, there's no life, but there's no fear. And a lot of people will give up a level of intimacy just so they don't have to feel the pain of fear. Now, what happens is, if she and I understand that we have a committed relationship and we're willing to deal with whatever needs to be dealt with in terms of our fears to get closer and intimate, what happens is we're willing to resolve this stuff as we get closer together. And so we can end up together yet separate, not joined at the hip, but we can be intimate and be in love and create a relationship that gets stronger and healthier. But it takes a lot of work because we're not used to doing what it takes. And we're going to be talking about what it takes in just a minute. Okay? So give her a hand for participating in that role play. What I want to do before we do our next role play is set the stage for it. And in order to do that, I'd like to go back to the illustrations. And what I'm going to talk about for the next little while is what I call the 4 functions of consciousness. Now, as good counseling and psychology students you are, I'm sure we could use other frameworks like the ego, superego, the id, so on and so forth, but I like this particular framework because it's so simple. Here what we have is what I consider the 4 functions of consciousness. In us, we experience feelings, we experience the thinking process, we experience sensations, feel, smell, taste, touch, those things, physical sensations. And we also experience spirit. And we ordinarily experience that connectedness through our intuition. Women seem to have a lot of it. Men seem not to really have a lot unless they have taken the time to spend a conscious commitment in prayer and meditation and some other things we're going to talk about in just a minute. But anyway, these are the 4 functions of consciousness. A lot has been written lately about spiritually awakening, or waking up spiritually, because it seems like if you can live life from an intuitive level of consciousness, then your life works. You're able to figure out the stuff you don't know. You're able to love another human being. You're able to live life in a way that's healthy. But what's going on in this illustration? Spirit is asleep because of all the other distractions we get plugged into. Here the illustration over on feelings is dealing with hurt, fear, guilt, sadness, and anger. And even, remember that smiley face, the happy woman who is mad? Even if she's not connected with this is happening on an unconscious level. And I guarantee you the stuff that's not resolved on an unconscious level takes away energy that you would otherwise be devoting to other levels of consciousness. So whether you're aware of it or not, if you've got unprocessed and unintegrated experiences from the past that hurt, then you're over there dealing with feelings somewhere in your consciousness. Over here, you're trying to figure yourself out. You're trying to figure your way out of a wet paper sack is the way I like to look at it. Our best thinking does absolutely very little. I mean, here we are in a graduate school setting. I've spent 26 years in school. You would think after 26 years I'd be smart. Thank God I'm not. Thank God I haven't decided that all that book learning is something to worship and to be real proud about. In fact, it's my belief that the more you learn, oftentimes it becomes an obstacle to really being able to enjoy life and being successful in life. I don't know whether you're still using this textbook or not, but there's a textbook called The Skilled Helper. And it goes something like this. The more graduate education one has in counseling or therapy, the less ability that person has to be able to sit and be with another human being, something along those lines. Yeah. So you have to kind of be on the watch for that. It doesn't, I mean, the only way you get a ticket to be able to do that professionally is you have to go through all this schooling. But don't take all that schooling real seriously in terms of not being a human being who can be centered and present with another human being. That's the most important part of being a counselor. Not because you can diagnose what's going on with another human being and play all these mental games in your mind and sit there thinking you know what this other human being ought to do.